Welcome to the Eloquist podcast, and this is class number 13 in the discourse Shom Yisroel, which is the third discourse in the overall book, B'Shashek Dimu 5672. Now, this class is special because if I calculated correctly, this is the 60th class. A little bit of a milestone, 60 classes, pretty good. Here we go. So we are now in chapter 11 in the chapters do not begin in each Maamor. The chapters remain continuous through the entire book. So this is chapter 11 from the beginning of the discourse, from the beginning of the original discourse. Chapter 11. And we are holding in the discussion after we've discussed at great length how the vessels are considered something new. He's going back to the lights, how the lights, and because the vessels come about through a state of disconnect from the source. That's how they evolve. However, the lights are a continuation of the source. There is no disconnect in the lights. The lights are a continuous flow of the Ein Sof. So that was the last thing that we were learning over here. And now, and the reason for that is because light, he presents it in two stages. The oires of the spheroids, the lights of the spheroids, they're all connected to the kav. They emerge from the kav in a manner of dveikos. They're a continuation of the kav. The Ein Sof, which I already called before, he called it Ein Sof Hamatzel, the emanator. The emanator emanates these lights as an emanation from him in a state of dveikos, in a state of connection. And now stage number 2, the emanator itself, that is the light of the kav, which is called emanator in comparison to the lights of Atzilus. The light of the kav is connected to the Ein Sof that's before the tzimtzum, because kav is a line and a revelation from the initial light that was before the tzimtzum. Again, as we learned in the beginning, that in the beginning there was the Ein Sof was completely filling all possible existence, the infinite light. Then God brought about the tzimtzum, which is this big black hole, so to speak, in which he hides the light and pulls the light back into himself. And then into the darkness, he reshines again the light, a beam of light. So that beam is connected to the original light that was shining in the space of the black hole, which is the Ein Sof, which is the infinite light. So there's a constant connection. The Ein Sof, the original Ein Sof, is flowing in a connected manner into the light of a kav. And then the light of a kav has these offshoots as it emanates the lights of the spheres, of the attributes. Comes out that the lights, the oil of the attributes, not the kalim, not the vessels, but the lights of the attributes are a continuum of the Ein Sof, and they're not something new. They're just, as he refers to it, Gilu Yahelim. It's the revelation of that which was concealed. So now he challenges this idea. V'hagam, and even though the kav nimshach gam ken idea tzimtzum, and even though the kav came about through the tzimtzum is a blockage on the light, a withholding of the light. The tzimtzum comes in and makes darkness, conceals the light, an absence of light. And then the kav emerged from the darkness, from the black hole comes the kav. So why are we saying that the kav is directly linked up with the Ein Sof, with the infinite light that's prior to the tzimtzum? Nevertheless, he says, true, yeah. The kav is like, first there is darkness, and then in the darkness, God says, let there be light. So the light is like seemingly coming from the tzimtzum, but that's not really what it is. It's the very light that was pulled in, that was once shining before the tzimtzum. This light was present. Now this light was pulled in back into the luminary itself. So it shouldn't be visible. It shouldn't be present. And then he emanates a narrow beam of light from the original light, and therefore it's not something new. It's a re-emergence of the light that was before the tzimtzum. That's what he says over here. Its flow, its drawing forth, is from the oirein sof shalifnei hatzimtzum, that's before the tzimtzum. So it's not like there is something new. The kalim, when they come about as something new, as something that didn't pre-exist. But the oir is a light that was always there. It was just concealed when Hashem made the tzimtzum. He pulled it back into himself. And now that original oirein sof that's before the tzimtzum is being emanated outward. However, it's not being emanated in a way that it's just filling the entire black hole, but rather it's emanating as a focused beam. But it's still a beam of the oirein sof. Now, even though we might say, in other words, the question is, when God brings back the light after he hides it, he hides all the light, and then he re-projects this kav. Is it really, can we really say it's the same light? To what degree did this light change, the oir, did it change and become kind of a new phenomenon? Now, even though, in other words, he's not ready to relinquish this challenge. He just challenged. He said it's not just simple that the oirein sof is just continuing as the kav. As we said earlier, the tzimtzum came and erased the light. And now comes a re-emanation of the light. He seems to be arguing that the re-emanation of the light is the very light itself. That's the argument. So now he re-challenges that argument and he says, even though there is a tzimtzum in between over here, the way this light is now being drawn forth is through the leap of the tzimtzum. That means there is a no and then a yeah again. So there's a certain interruption. There is a flow, there's a revelation, a stop of the revelation, an interruption, and then there is a leaping over the interruption. It's like a skipping over and a coming about. And that means that the light causes a change in the light. Why? And the example that the Kabbalists give for this is like hair that come forth on a person's head. From the person's skull come forth the hair. And where is the hair coming from? It's growing on the head. And it says that in every single hair is really a tube. If you put a hair under a microscope, you would see that a hair is a tube. And inside that tube, it's like a pipe, flows energy. And which energy is flowing? The reason why the hair grows around the head is because the head has so much, the brain has so much life, so much chayos. So some of that chayos that's in the brain kind of leaks into the hair. It's like a leakage. It's from the excessive energy that's in the brain that protrudes out into the hair. So now, therefore, what does that mean? That the energy that's flowing, that's going in a person's hair is really their brain power, their brain sauce, like kind of their brain liquid. It's not liquid, but it's the energy, it's the spiritual life force that's in the brain is now going into the hair. But can you compare the energy that's in the brain to the energy that's in the hair? There's two factors over here that make it what's seemingly incomparable. Number one, the amount of brain power that gets into one individual hair is so minuscule, so tiny, so insignificant. Number two, although it's the same energy that's in the brain that's going out into the hair, it's however going through the skull. It has to break through the skull. The fact that it's going through the skull is already changing the nature of that energy. The fact that the energy must protrude through the thick skull, that already has an effect on the energy that qualitatively, earlier we spoke about quantity. It's only a tiny bit. In quantity, it's a little crumb of the energy that's in the mind, that's in the head, that's going into the hair. But now it's also qualitatively. Why? The fact that it's pushing its way through the skull, that has to change it. That has to weaken whatever that is, the brightness of it, the sharpness of it, and it becomes hair life and not brain life. So the same concept is explained in Kabbalah, that when the entire light of the Kav that's coming forth after God pulls back, the tzimtzum is considered like the skull. It's a block, it's a wall. And now the power that's going through is, number one, it's only quantity, a tiny little bit. That's why it's called a kav. It's a little light. Number two, it's passing through the tzimtzum. And what is all of this? Why is he talking about that now? Because this seems to counter the concept of what we're saying earlier, that the light that's emanating, the oiros, the lights of the sphirot, they're just a continuation of what was. And here we're saying, no, there is a major disconnect. The fact that it's going through the skull, and it comes through first it being hidden, and now that it's going through the skull, it's so little, and it would seem like once there is a tzimtzum, we might kind of argue and say that it's not even anymore deriving its energy from the brain, it's deriving its energy from the skull. Because the skull is like a wall. The skull also has some energy. So the hair is being fed, is being nurtured by the skull and not by the brain. So he says, no, but that's not the case. And the same would be the argument that the kav is receiving its life from the tzimtzum. Maybe inside the tzimtzum there is some level of divine. The tzimtzum is not only a no, it's also a yeah. In the tzimtzum there is also some light, and maybe that's the juice that's going into the kav, is the juice of the tzimtzum, not of the Orin Sof. So therefore he says, no, that's not the case. Although it's true that there is a tzimtzum and there is a block, but when the light comes out, it's the light from the Orin Sof as it's making its way through the tzimtzum. Again, so let's first see the question. Even though the way it comes about is through the leap of the tzimtzum, of the contraction. Like the example of hair. They have that's coming through the interruption of the skull. Nevertheless, that does not rip it away completely. That does not sever it to a point that it's considered severed and something new. And that does not negate the concept that we said earlier, that the kav and the oir is still a continuation of what was before. Why? Because just like we go back to the hair, the cyrus, the hair, derive their energy from the brain. We don't attribute the life force of the hair to the skull. The skull is only the medium, the filter kind of through which it's going through, but the actual energy itself is the brain energy. And so the same also applies above. So to the holy thread, the holy precious thread. It must be a phrase from Zohar or for something probably from Zohar, which refers to the light of the Kav as Chutta Yakira Kadisha, the holy thread, the holy precious thread, the Ikra Mazel, which is called a mazel, and mazel means it comes from the word that when you know from Kabbalah, we learned that there is a lot of mazalos, and mazel really means drip, something that's dripping. It's referring to a very, very minimal, flow, which is only dripping. And it's explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus that from the highest places of the Ein Sof, the energy has to be reduced so much because even the tiniest revelation of this is even a crumb of the infinite is infinite. It must come in a drip. And that's the concept of the hair. It's so minuscule. However, the Ikra Mazel, which is called Mazel, it's still in a state of Dveikus. Dveikus means attachment, in the infinite one, blessed to see. Shaham Shechasoy, which the Kav is now being drawn out to be in a state of Giloy, of revelation. And therefore, we can say about the Kav. And consequently, the oiros, the lights of the sphirot, which are a product of the kav, which they are also emanations of the kav. So the kav is an emanation, and they're emanations of the kav. So therefore, this entire realm of emanation of Kav and all the Eres that come from it is not considered something new, but it's traceable to the source, and it's like, and we can say upon it that it's the source being revealed. It's a gilui, it's a revelation of the concealment, as opposed to attributing something new to it as saying that it does not exist and it's a new entity. The kalim, the vessels, yeah, they are new, because as we discussed earlier, they come about not through connection. The kalim are a product of the tzimtzum. It's not a product of the light of the kav. The kalim are a consequence of the letters of the Rishimu, which the letters of the Rishimu is all about, is not a in a state of attachment. It's a state of newness. Even in the Or Ein Sof, the letters of the Rishimu seem to be separated from the Or Ein Sof, although they are of the Or Ein Sof, but they seem to be separated from the Or Ein Sof. And the way the letters of the Rishimu affect further, we learned, is in a manner of non-connection. Right? All that we discussed earlier, but not so with the lights, the Oiros. The Oiros are on all, in every point, the Oiros are a continuous connection, a continuous flow. We will look further in chapter 18, where this will be further explained. Okay, so this is really, right over here, is the end, if you might say, of this discourse. Because the main point of this discourse, the third discourse, Vayichan Shom Yisroel, was to differentiate between the lights and the vessels. In which point, this point, that vessels are called, again, we're trying to reconcile this, that it says the contradiction regarding the Sfirot. What's the contradiction? That on the one hand, we say about the Sfirot that the Sfirot are Yesh Me'ayin, something from nothing. On the other hand, we say about the Sfiros, they are Gilui Helam, they're just a revelation of what is concealed. So they're not something new. Are they or are they not? And the answer that he suggested over here is the lights are a continuation and they're not something new. But the vessels that are that give the character to the energy and the definitions and the limitations, that's something new that happens in Atzilus, and therefore that's Yesh Me'ayin. That's the summary of really the entire chapter. However, in the last, from here to the end, is going to be a parenthesis. And what's this parenthesis coming to do? He's going to now, based on everything we learned, he's going to point out that there is a certain quality then to the vessels over the lights. Now we're, based on what we explained earlier, the lights are what should be applauded. The lights are to be praised because the lights are just a revelation of Or Ein Sof. The vessels are, as we learned, inconsequential. They're much lower, they're far more insignificant. Obviously, they're the source of creation, but they're disconnected. But he's going to point out from now to the end of the chapter that if we analyze this deeply, we see that precisely the vessels have a certain quality that the lights don't have. And the reason he's doing this, precisely, even though it's parenthetical and it's off subject, is because in this part that he's going to explain, I can't say the reason. The reason is a Rebbe is way beyond my understanding, but the seeming reason is because he's now going to explain. Remember, we said that whenever these discourses were given, they were written first as one continued discourse, but then when the Rebbe would say it, he would break it up, in other words, splice it, these discourses into sections, and give over, one discourse at a time. And in each time, he connected it to the parsha, to the weekly Torah portion, or to the holiday in which the discourse was said. This discourse was said on the second day of Shavuot, of the holiday of Shavuos. For that reason, he's now going to connect it back to the beginning. The beginning of the discourse, he began with the verse. The name of the discourse is that Vayichan Shom Yisroel, that the Jewish people camped by Mount Sinai, and it says that they camped and they were all like one person with one heart. There was a powerful unity that was achieved on the first day of the month of Sivan, and this is considered the highest level of preparation the Jews were able to prepare for the giving of the Torah was that they reached such a state of unity, they became like one person. So he asked in the beginning of the discourse, why was that so significant for the giving of the Torah that we should be this unity? Based on what we're learning over here, he's going to explain the depth of what that means of that unity. And it is going to have to do with the concept that there's something special about the kalim, about the vessels, that exceeds even the quality from a certain level than the lights. So let's see. Now behold, from this that we've explained earlier, Yuvan will understand that from one angle, we're going to find that there is a supremacy, there is something greater to the vessels over the lights, which is going to be, which by the way, it's going to be fascinating. Once you say the vessels are higher than the lights, what it really, this is going to translate into the concept that the body is going to be higher than the soul, and earth is going to be greater than heaven. And this is going, and he's going to now explain the reason why the lights, which to the lights, the vessels are absolutely nothing and insignificant and finite and tiny and meaningless, and yet why do the lights descend to become the soul of the vessels? So you'll say they're forced. Maybe God forces the lights, but God is not forcing anything. Hashem doesn't force. Hashem is inspiring. So when the lights are going down to the vessels, it's because, as he's going to explain, the lights are sensing that there is a quality of the vessels that they don't have. That the vessels have a certain intimacy with God's very self, a certain deeper bond with God himself. And the lights are seeking attachment. That's the nature of light. Light is attached. And it realizes that its attachment is inferior than, from a very deep place, the attachment of the vessels. So it goes into the vessels to gain that attachment that the vessels have. And that will also explain why souls go into bodies. Because the soul recognizes that the body possesses a secret that the soul doesn't have. Okay, so this is just a little sneak peek of what he's going to say. From this that we said earlier, Yuvam will be understood. The be'emes, in truth, yes, Yisroel ma'ila bekelim, there is a greater advantage to the vessels ala oiros. From one angle, there is a greater advantage to the vessels over the lights. The shayrish kalim, because the root of the vessels hemarishimu. So before we say this, let's see. Let's just first make an observation. The lights, let's trace them. The lights, which is the soul of the vessels of Atzilus. Remember, the vessels have a body, which is the kalim. The sphirot, the attributes have a body, which are the kalim, and they have a soul. The soul is the energy that flows in them. So the source of the lights of the sphirot is in the kav, is in the thread. And where is the thread sourced? The thread is sourced in the Or Ein Sof, in the infinite light. That's before the tzimtzum. That's before the contraction. That's what he established. Now, what's the source of the vessels? The vessels of Atzilus, we explained their source, their first origins, we said, is in Adam Kadmon, is in primordial man. That's where you're already beginning. That's where everything that later will be created, all shapes and forms and definitions are already there. But really, if we trace them even further back, we can see them, or we can originate them in the power, in the letters of the Rishimu. Right? In the letters of the Rishimu, in the letters of the traces of light that were left over when God erased his light, there was a trace left over. These are these letters. Oisius Rishim. And that's the source of the kalim, of the vessels. And we remember those letters is the self-limiting power of God, which, if you trace it higher, is the self-limiting power of God before the tzimtzum. It's even higher, we explained earlier, as it is one with the limitlessness of God, but it's still a power of limitation, right? So, but the main point over here is to if we have to distill these concepts to just one point, and that is the source of the oiros, of the soul, the souls of Atzilus, and ultimately our souls as well. The source of the spiritual life forces, including the oiros of the spheres of Atzilus, is in the kav, is in the light, and the source of the kalim is in, sometimes we say it's in the Tzimtzum. But the point over here, but we've explained, it's not in the Tzimtzum itself. It's the Tzimtzum allowed for the letters of the Rishimu to be visible. And where are the Kalim coming from? They're coming from the letters of the Rishimu. Rishimu, again, the letters of the trace, the leftover letters of the Ein Sof. So he says, take a look at something amazing. The difference between the Kav and the letters of the Rishimu, the Kav is so much superior, it would seem like. Because Kav is a re-emanation of Or Ein Sof. The Or Ein Sof shines back again and emanates Kav. Kav is plugged into Or Ein Sof. The letters of the Rishimu, they're quite on the contrary. The letters of the Rishimu come into existence only when the infinite light gets hidden, and then you can see the letters of the Rishimu. So we would see that the Kav is of so much superior quality than the letters of the Rishimu. However, further analysis says the opposite. That what? The letters of the Rishimu, they're a trace of what? They're a trace of the Or Ein Sof that the Tzimtzum could not erase. What did the Tzimtzum do? The Tzimtzum came and erased everything. Besides what? Besides a trace. That means that this trace is still of the original. Now, let's take a look at the Kav. The Kav is also plugged into Or Ein Sof. No, but it's a difference. The Kav was completely obliterated through the Tzimtzum. When the Tzimtzum came and erased all the light, it wasn't even a tiny beam of light left over. Light, there was no light. There were letters left over, but not light. The light of the Or Ein Sof was the infinity of the power of the infinity of God was completely hidden, without a trace. So then, where does the Kav come from? The Kav comes from after God dims it to zero. He returns his light back on and emanates light again, not to the infinite, to a light of a Kav. Fine. So it's chayzer v'heyer, it's coming back again. But first, it was blocked by the Tzimtzum. So the Kav, the Or Ein Sof that's in the Kav, the Tzimtzum negated it. But the letters of the Rishimu, the Tzimtzum did not negate. Comes out that the letters of the Rishimu is still of what is there, of the original Or Ein Sof that's there. Since the Kalim come from the Rishimu, and the Rishimu is of the original Or Ein Sof, so comes out that from this perspective, the Kalim have a deeper connection to the original Or Ein Sof than the lights do. Because in the lights come from something where there was a no and then a yeah. The light went completely out. There was a blackout. And then the lights were turned on again. So there was a no. The Kalim are connected to something that was never, the lights never went out. Although the light went out, but the substance of these letters are of what was once of the Ein Sof and never, the Tzimtzum couldn't affect it, couldn't negate it. So it's still, meaning it's more ancient, it's more original. The Kav is something new. Although it's a renewal, something that was there that went away, but yes, there's something new. As the Kav is now, it's new, but the Rishimu is ancient. So, obviously this needs quite a bit more explanation. We're going to leave it for next class. I just want to read it inside. They are from the Rishimu. This is a trace from the Ein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. As stated elsewhere, the Rishimu, the letters of the Rishimu, the Tzimtzum did not affect them, did not touch them, did not diminish them. Okay. But I'm going to skip for a moment over here. Because I just want to make the point. He's now going to go back. I'm going to lead a few lines further. Then tomorrow we're going to come back, the next class. But contrast that with the lights that are coming from the Kav. Even though its root is from the Or Ein Sof, that's before the Tzimtzum. Like we said before, the hairs that are protruding outward are are really rooted in the brain itself, not in the skull. So it's getting back to the original light. However, the way it comes about is after the light was hidden, and then it returned and was redrawn again. Since it came through a no, there is an interruption, and on this level, interruption is a big thing. But in the kalim, there is never an interruption. Wow. Although visibly they seem they're completely disconnected. Okay, so we'll still dance around with that Be'ezrat Hashem in the next class. And meanwhile, let Mashiach be here today.